Thank you, Ryan, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with you again this year. Last year I was able to present on Hurrvac as well, but I focused on the long history of Hurrvac and how we transitioned to being an open system-based software product. So if you are interested in that aspect of Hurrvac, please look for the presentations from last year. How many of you in the room have used Hurrvac or have user accounts? Okay, a few. Well, if you are a federal, state, or local employee, it's a free program thanks to sponsorship from FEMA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA. So I encourage you, and at the end of the presentation, there will be instructions on how to sign up if it interests you. Hurrvac has been around for more than 30 years. We've tracked 268 Atlantic hurricanes total, starting with Hurricane Hugo in 1988. And we primarily support coastal communities from Texas to Maine, although it is a worldwide tracking program, so other users in other areas of the world as well, but all U.S. government-based. This thing is sensitive. Okay, one thing I'll say is on the right edge, you'll note that these are the kind of the three basic types of data that Hurrvac combines to help the emergency manager make decisions when they're looking at the threat to their local community from a tropical system. So it combines forecast products primarily from the National Hurricane Center, storm surge modeling that's done independent of any one single storm for the coastal communities from Texas to Maine and Hawaii as well, and Puerto Rico. And then evacuation studies, which are conducted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that look at the vulnerable area, the traffic, the population in that area, the roadway system, and how long it would take to evacuate the population that needs to get out in advance of a storm. So my presentation today is going to focus on the 2024 season because it was a significant one. As you'll notice here, there were 5 total hurricane landfalls in 2024, but the season got a fairly slow start. It wasn't until late September with Helene and Milton that we really were feeling the pressure. Okay, there we go. So we're going to focus on Helene and Milton, and I believe some of the other presenters are also going to talk about how their applications and data also, worked in supporting you all in responding to these storms. So this is Hurrvac. It is at this point a web browser-based program, and this is how it looked just last week. When I took this screenshot, you'll see in the active storms section, there are 2 storms in the South Indian Ocean and the South Pacific that we're tracking. But if we look back to September of 2024, when Helene was active, you'll see how many more systems there were that Hurrvac was tracking. So 3 in the Atlantic alone, 1 in the East Pacific, and several in the 3 in the West Pacific as well. So Hurrvac, aggregates all this data. It's getting new forecasts from the National Hurricane Center and other forecast centers every 6 hours, if not every 3 hours. And it's putting it in the program for you, so you don't have to have a whole lot of GIS skills to, pull data layers in yourself. It's doing all that for you as the emergency manager, so you can focus on doing your job of protecting the public. On the Conditions tab, there is a number of live layers, and so we took some screenshots during Helene to kind of give you an idea of what the program would look like there. You'll notice that there were notifications that were coming into the system, so anytime the National Hurricane Center would post a new update of the location of the storm every hour or some significant development, like they had seen a rapid intensification of the storm, it would appear in Hurrvac. So the emergency manager is very aware of that in the moment. Of course, one of the big stories with Helene was the inland flooding that occurred in the southern Appalachians, and that will probably be addressed in the later presentations, so I won't spend too much time on it. But there were layers in Hurrvac to help alert the emergency manager of what was coming and what was actually occurring. So this is there are a bunch of river gauge locations in Hurrvac, and you can click on any one of those and see the water level. And so I just wanted to note here that the French Broad River at Asheville rose 10 feet over flood stage, so really devastating. So that was Helene. Very quick presentation on Helene. No rest for the weary. The poor emergency managers in Florida and FEMA responders were having to immediately look at the potential threats from Milton. You can see here in this graphic the track that Helene took that was more north-facing, and that red line that's kind of in the background there. And then what you see in this presentation is what's called the error cone. The cone is just a depiction of where the center of the storm is most likely to track. So it doesn't speak to the threats itself, just where the center of the storm is most likely to track. Even before the Hurricane Center begins issuing numbered advisories, you have the advantage of looking at also this product called the Tropical Weather Outlook in the program. And so this is showing how the program would have looked with the Tropical Weather Outlook turned on prior to the start of the advisories for Milton. So it's showing you that in this big red blob of an area, there was a very high chance of formation within the next really 2 days, if not, the longer period. So this is now a 7-day product, and is very highly recommended that you always check this daily during hurricane season. Okay, so once a system begins to be tracked with numbered advisories, that's when the heart of Hurrvac, Hurrvac is short for Hurricane and Evacuation, begins to pull together, the combination of the hurricane evacuation study data with the storm surge data, with the potential track that the storm is going to take. And so at this point, the local emergency manager is using Hurrvac to evaluate the potential storm surge threats in which coastal zones, which are pre-delineated through the hurricane evacuation study process, might need to evacuate. So in this example, we're saying that zones A, B, C, and D in Pinellas County, Florida, might need to evacuate. And that, results in a number of hours of 26, I believe is what that says, in which, if you were to call for an evacuation and have it completed in time, you would need that number of hours to have it run. Okay. All right, so a timing arc is Hurrvac's visual technique for determining how much time remains before an evacuation needs to begin. And so the emergency manager is kind of trying to decide, do I need to base my decision to call for an evacuation in my community on this advisory? Can I afford to wait another 6, 12, 24 hours? And what this timing arc does is it's based on the size of the arc is based on a combination of how fast the storm is forecast to move towards you and the number of hours, that 26 hours we saw in the last slide. So we advance the storm through the forecast period, and when it touches that arc, that is an indication of, okay, this is where the storm would be when the evacuation would need to be started. How am I doing on time?
I think you're doing fine.
Okay, yay. All right, so that's the gist of what Hurrvac is mainly intended to do. I will note that there are some post-storm assessment tools in it, not nearly as much. It is primarily a tool that's used by emergency managers in the lead up to landfall. But you can get to depictions of the area impacted by the different thresholds of winds, the red area being the area that was most likely to have hurricane winds. And then if you go to the conditions tab right after a system has come through, you'll see the amount of rain that fell. And then finally, there's a special hindcast, storm surge hindcast that the National Hurricane Center runs. They try to do it within 24 hours of landfall, and it's along a known track of the storm, so there's not the uncertainty and inaccuracy that comes from the forecast not being what actually happened. They're able to actually calibrate what they get out of this modeling of the hindcast by looking at whatever tide station data they have in the vicinity and how that aligns with what they're getting out of the model. So the hindcast can be useful to the local emergency managers and responders in deciding where to focus their recovery efforts and their rescue efforts. All right, so that's it. Here's how to register for Hurrvac. It's hurrvac.com is the site, and we encourage you to join us and use the program. We have over 30,000 registered users and are able to, thanks to the system scaling in AWS Cloud, handle 5,000 to 6,000 at once using the program. Thanks.